One of the greatest romance anime of all time, which is only available for streaming in the United States on Amazon Plus, is the topic of our video today. Not only is this video, in my perception, one of the best romance anime, but I would say it's kind of almost like a love letter to the anime community or the otaku community, if we want to generalize it a little bit. This anime is called Wotakoi, Love is Hard for Otaku. Wotakoi comes from the Japanese name Wotaku ni koi wa muzukashi. In this episode, we'll be discussing otaku love, love between otakus, and how this is quite possibly one of the best romance anime and comedy, romance comedy anime to exist. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Animel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Mel, the host of this channel. As told by the intro, we will be talking about Wotakoi today. We'll use Wotakoi to keep things short because the Japanese title and the official English title is way too long. First off, let's start with a synopsis. What is the story of Wotakoi about? Aside from the fact that it is a romance comedy, Wotakoi is mainly about two otakus, Momose Narumi and Ninfuji Hirotaka, and how these two childhood friends come to meet each other again as they are both working in the same workplace now. Narumi transfers to another company, which actually happens to be the same company that Hirotaka works at. And the reason that she actually ends up transferring to this job is because at her last company, where she had a boyfriend that's now her ex-boyfriend and her coworkers all found out that she is an otaku. More specifically, she is a fujoshi otaku. If you don't know what fujoshi means, it means a woman who loves boy love manga and anime. And because she worked so hard to kind of hide this part of her life that she's an otaku, she decides to up and quit her job and move to another company. And here, Hirotaka and Narumi discuss how hard it is for them and for them to find love as otakus because they're ashamed. They find it hard to share their interests with somebody who's a non-otaku, but then they don't want to date other otakus because that in itself is also a little bit weird, I guess. But to round out the intro and episode 1, because they both realize it's so hard for each of them to find love, they kind of decide to start dating each other out of convenience because they are both otaku and they both know each other from a young age, even though they haven't seen each other for years, and think that, in the meantime, maybe this might be the best form of love both of them can get. However, Narumi doesn't necessarily have feelings for her childhood friend Hirotaka, but the show of Wotakoi, Love is Hard for Otaku, goes on to explore how they actually both find love within each other, even though this romance or this relationship started out as a means of convenience, at least for Narumi. Oh, and I realize I've been throwing the word otaku around a little bit. For those of you who are currently watching and may not know what otaku means, an otaku is essentially someone, most notably Japanese people, but I think this can be applicable to other countries as well. An otaku is someone who has a strong interest or an obsessive interest in something in relation to pop culture, most notably anime or manga. But this can also be applied to video games, cosplaying, and other aspects of pop culture in that regard. In America, I guess you could say an otaku is the equivalent of a geek or a nerd, terminology-wise, as how they use otaku in Japan, except the phrase otaku sometimes comes with some negative connotations that Wotakoi does a really good job of debunking. Now, you may be asking, Mel, can we get to the point? Why do you feel like Wotakoi is the best anime or romance anime of all time for you? Well, there's numerous reasons. Reason number 1, the characters. First of all, as an anime fan, and if you're a strong anime fan like I am, then just being able to see these characters and the different interests that each character takes on makes it really easy for an anime viewer or a manga enjoyer or even someone who loves video games to identify with any one of the main characters. Our two main characters that I've already mentioned, which are Narumi, has a strong love, as I mentioned earlier, for BL, boy love, manga and anime, whereas her boyfriend, Hirotaka, is really into video games. They call him a video game or a gaming otaku. Within the same first episode, we get introduced to Narumi and Hirotaka's co-workers, Koyanagi Hanako and Kabakura Taro, who are also otaku. Hanako is a cross-cosplaying otaku that likes to cosplay bishonen. Bishonen essentially means beautiful guys or pretty guys, and is also really into BL manga and anime like Narumi is. This is what gets them to bond, I want to say, I think within episode 1, and they become instant friends. Then you've got Taro, who is Hanako's boyfriend, and they've actually been dating a lot longer in comparison to Narumi and Hirotaka. He is, I want to say, maybe more like a closeted otaku, which some of you also may identify as, but he enjoys bishoujo, which means pretty girl or cute girl anime and manga, but he tries to keep it on the down low. And even though he likes to engage in these things with his girlfriend at times, he does find her overbearing in her love for cosplaying male characters, and the fact that she's always trying to get him to cosplay as female characters. It's a really fun and funny dynamic, because at some point you come to realize that, and you as a viewer, as an anime fan or a manga fan, also acknowledge that while there are so many other big fans out there that engage in the overall community, we all have our different interests and we can't expect each other's interests to be the same. So even if I had other anime friends, there isn't always the high chance that we're watching all the same anime or we like to engage with anime and manga in the same way. There are people who choose to show their love via cosplay versus reading and watching as many different shows as others. There are some who enjoy writing their own fan fiction. Narumi, for example, she writes her own BL love fiction and sells some of these books and stories at conventions, something that another part of the anime or manga community may be familiar with. So long story short, the characters themselves are really easy to connect with and relate with just because they cover a broad spectrum of types of otaku. To make this even better, as I mentioned earlier, the way the otaku is perceived in this show is not as negatively characterized as what may be perceived in the mass population of people who are not otaku. While all 4 of these characters are otaku and identify as otaku, even the closeted one, they live very normal lives and do very normal things. And at times, otaku are perceived to be people who are shut in, who don't engage in anything else and are antisocial or non-sociable, which is anything but the case. And with that, all of these characters are between the ages of 26 and like 30. So personally for me, I fall within or around that age range. It made it so relatable when I watched it for the first time. And as a person who has loved and engaged in anime throughout most of her life since my childhood years, it made me feel a certain type of special connection to be like, wow, I feel like this anime is speaking to me. And this anime is in some shape or form a little bit about me. Because even though each of these characters are proud to be otaku and love meeting other otaku like them and engaging in their own activities and interests, they do their best to keep their interests in check and not let other people who are non-otaku know about them and their otaku interests. And at times it makes it really hard for them to connect with other people and make friends, or it makes it hard for them to meet a loved one or someone that could be their loved one or their spouse or their girlfriend or their boyfriend, because people will think of them as weird. Which is the second aspect of the relatability of these characters, is we enter into this conversation about dating and dating other people who could potentially find your interests weird. So much so that it makes it hard for you to make a connection. And I have to say that when I was watching this anime, it made me feel extremely grateful that I had an experience, and not many people have this experience. I had an experience growing up where majority of my friends in school, in high school, and middle school were also into anime or manga. But I have heard often from other people in the community, and I feel like people kind of generally talk about this, is that whenever there was a kid in class, or if you were the kid in class that was really into anime, people would often think that you were weird or they would make fun of you. And I feel like I never had that experience. So if anything, this anime just made me feel more grateful about it. And it made me realize that even as an adult, I can still enjoy these things. Because there definitely was a point in my life that I was like, I'm really starting to love and enjoy anime again. I'm starting to feel a new type of connection to anime as an adult just because I understand the storylines better, I understand the messaging better, versus when I was like 13, 14 years old. When you're about that age, it's all about the fights and things of that nature. And when you start to hit your mid-20s or early 20s, you start to realize the deeper messaging that anime has and kind of how it impacts your life when you watch these things. And then it made me feel like, wow, I feel like everyone who watches or engages in anime or manga or video games or something that they're just really passionate about pop culture wise should watch this. Because if anything, it reminds you also that there is someone out there for you that will accept your interests. Whether they share those interests with you or not, shouldn't really matter, but there is basically love and friends out there for everyone that will accept your interests. If I will say, that is probably the biggest proponent as to why I love this romance so much, just because it's one about loving yourself and then being able to build a loving relationship with others that have similar interests or can accept your interests. For the most part, we've talked about how this show shows a love for the otaku community and how each of the different characters are able to find love and romance between each other just from their base interests as otaku. But the show also takes its time to address dating issues or elements amongst adults overall. Since I mentioned that most of the characters are in their late 20s, early 30s, we see a different type of romance story happening. So first of all, if you are the type to watch an anime or a romance anime that is really dramatic or really high-paced or really intense and all these different cliche romantic aspects that you always see in anime, you probably are not going to get a lot of that just because they approach romance in a very different way, which makes it, I feel, for me, a little bit or a lot more enjoyable. And they go on to address a bunch of different things between these couples, like jealousy, miscommunication or having a hard time communicating with each other, and communicating one's feelings in a proper way by not acting like a tsundere or tsundere. Then you have some kind of classic romantic dynamics or couple dynamics that I feel like are more realistic. While anime in general, or romance anime in general, does do the whole opposites attract thing, the polarity between Hirotaka and Narumi I would classify more as an extrovert and Hirotaka more as an introvert. The dynamic between them isn't overly polarized as perhaps in other romance anime, and they do an opposites attract really well. Whereas Hanako and Taro, these two are, I guess you say I don't know if the word is more mature, but definitely a well spent together couple. Because you can tell that they really understand each other and they don't have a hard time communicating with each other. If anything, they communicate a little bit too much that maybe they should think about what they say more often. So this ends up leading to a lot of small bickering and fighting. Not only that, but they also roast each other a lot. But you want to know something? I feel like if you're not roasting your significant other every once in a while, would you really call it love? I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm also not kidding. Hanako and Taro basically have a constant friendly fire banter that's always going on, which makes me feel like they're a realer representation of what many years of being together with somebody else looks like. There's another element of dating that they start to explore from the first episode between Narumi and Hirotaka, but also between Hanako and Taro at some point, is the whole idea of dating for convenience. This is something that can be really popular or popularly generalized about relationships and marriages in Japan, is that sometimes these relationships happen as a means of convenience. Yes, you may have feelings for that person, but you also see it as, this is a convenient relationship for me to have. And when I first watched it versus rewatching it recently, I'm starting to realize how this idea is more applicable perhaps in other countries now, principally in the United States. As life becomes more and more expensive, I think people are starting to look for partners, not just necessarily out of love, but also financial stability and being able to buy a home with somebody else because you have a greater income together versus alone. This is an interesting concept that Wotakoi touches on that can be seen more and more as the years go on from when it originally aired to now. And then aside from all of the heavy relatable dating general themes that they address, there are some funny moments like when Narumi is invited over to Hirotaka's place and she thinks, you know, some steamy stuff is about to go down. And she's trying to remember what color her underwear is. And she spends the entire day since he has invited her trying to remember what color her underwear is. Because let's be real, as a woman, I can highly identify with that. And I think any other woman could say that they were definitely there at one point in their life where they were like, is today the day that we should be trying something like this because the undergarments are not correct today. It's definitely got some spicy humor and elements that they explore within Wotakoi, so this is definitely an adult anime. And just some additional nuggets that makes Wotakoi so much more enjoyable, aside from the exploration of these romance themes and romance within otaku relationships and the difficulty of dating as an otaku. There are lots of moments that they drop real name anime, video games, and manga within the show that makes it almost feel like this could be real. A lot of the anime or manga or video game that is kind of just dropped so nonchalantly are like Donkey Kong, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Evangelion, Pokemon, and then almost every single, or not every single, but a lot of the scenes incorporate this type of gaming window. You know those gaming windows that you used to play when you played like Pokemon on the regular Game Boy or Game Boy Color? I feel like I'm aging myself by saying this, but it had that like black window that asked if you were gonna attack or you were gonna like use your inventory or you were gonna run. Yeah, it's kind of like that. And then it just adds like a new level of humor because this whole show is about otaku expressing their love for their interests, but then they put it in context for other otaku or anime or video game or manga fans to instantly geek over more. And then we also get to see how they engage with each of the different types of mediums that they love. Like we see Narumi and Hanako go to a convention where Narumi is selling her BL manga and Hanako is dressed as a Bishonen. Again, beautiful, pretty guy. And she passes off her dude really well to the point that Taro, her boyfriend, doesn't pay her any mind or else he'll get extremely jealous. And then there are times that they come together to hang out like regular friends. And they're actually just playing Mario Kart together, which I feel like I've done a lot with my other friends. And the last thing that I'll say is that I know that the category and genre of romance is not for everyone. But if I could convince you as a non-romance watcher that is currently watching this video to watch Wotakoi, is that the first thing that I'll say to anyone who's not a lover of romance genres is that you should watch a romance comedy. Because if anything, this has a strong comedy genre attached to it, almost to the point that you can consider this equally comedy, but also romance. Just due to the over-the-top, also anime references. Like there's a moment that Narumi's face becomes so warped that she looks like a JoJo character. Or when Hirotaka and Narumi are complaining about how hard dating is and how Narumi always picks the wrong men. But then Hirotaka just casually says, you know how you could never make the wrong choices? By playing an otome game. An otome game is basically a dating simulation game. They add in humor that any anime, video game, or manga fan could instantly laugh at just because it feels so out of place within Wotakoi as a romance, but then comes from other otaku or video game anime genres that you've seen before. All in all, more than anything, if you don't watch this for the romance, I definitely would say watch this just because it almost feels like a dedicated love letter to the otaku community or the anime community, manga, video game community, any part of a pop culture community that has such a strong fandom. And I feel like it gives people a sort of comfort that there's always someone else out there that you can connect with. Whether it's romantically or platonically, there is a community that you can connect with that you can definitely be yourself around. And that in regards to romance, there is definitely someone out there who will love you for who you are and love you for all the interests that you have. And maybe the exact interest won't be perfectly aligned, but the important thing is that you accept each other for who each of you are. It's like the most beautiful messaging hidden under layers of ridiculousness that is Wotakoi at times. So I hope you give it a watch. And if you have seen it before, I'd love to know your thoughts of Wotakoi in the comments below. Do you think it is possibly one of the greatest romance anime manga for the anime community or within the anime community? And if you plan on watching it, please let me know your thoughts on Wotakoi if it's your first time making a pass at it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I put a lot of love into it. Hopefully you can tell, just because I love this anime so much and it did so much for me in better accepting myself and better accepting my interests. Not that I ever had much of a problem with it, but it just made me more open about it to the point that I can casually talk about it with my friends, or I more casually talk about it with my husband, even though, funny enough, my husband got me into One Piece. So that's by the by. But again, it just makes me so appreciative that I have a partner that fully understands my interests, supports my interests, and accepts my interests, even if he doesn't engage in all the same anime that I do, and he doesn't love anime in the same way that I do. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, let me know your thoughts below in the comments, what you thought, what you think about Wotakoi if you've seen it. You could also engage with me on Instagram and Threads if you want to talk further about Wotakoi, because I cannot gush about the anime enough. But that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining. This has been another episode of Animel. I'm your host, Mel, and I will catch you all next week. Bye!